Hello, this is Positive Vibes Enterprise. This is Thomas Goodwin, and the subject today is heart and mind, which means it has to do with feelings and intuition, which represent heart, and reason and rationality, and thinking things through, which has to do with the mind. Um, obviously, the heart is a physical organ, but it's also used um, to it's very connected to feeling in how people associate it. And when people and as an organ, it seems to when you focus on your heart, you seem to connect very much with feelings. So there's a relationship between the two. Um, the reason I'm talking about this is that I have a very rational approach towards the spiritual. That's because I believe the spiritual is reasonable, is rational, and works in a way in which it makes sense. I don't believe we have an irrational God or an irrational universal spirit guiding how reality works. I believe things happen reasonably and that we can use our mind to figure things out. And a lot of times people will be guided by their heart and they will do things, they will get involved in things that aren't in their best interest because their heart isn't always guided the best way. In other words, they don't use their head enough, their mind enough to think things through before they do things, and that can get you into trouble. A lot of people have a lot of heartache because they have fallen in love with the wrong person, because they're not programmed properly to be able to figure out who the right person is, and you have to figure it out through thinking, through listening to the other person's mind process. You cannot just react emotionally, or because emotions are so much affected by desires, and your desires will override you, and they will affect your emotions. They will affect your heart, and then you will just do things a lot of the times that are not in your best interest. Your intuition is not perfect. Your intuition is a thing that can be trained, and I'm very much into training the intuition, because I know that a lot of people will use their intuition to judge people, and you say you're not to judge. Well, you always judge. You always have an impression, and you react in that impression on a visceral level, whether you think you're judging or not. You are judging. It just happens automatically. You're judging reality, you're judging other people. You're doing it all the time, and it's done intuitively. And so when people judge me wrongly because I'm different, I know their intuition is wrong. People's intuition a lot of times is wrong. Their gut feelings get them into a lot of trouble, and they pay the price, and there's emotional pain related to it. Intuition can work really well, but it has to be trained, and you have to test it and use it and see how reliable it is. One has spiritual programming within you that determines how you react to things that come to you spiritually, how you sense the spiritual and interpret it. You have to interpret what comes from the spiritual. The spiritual is not does not come in a clear language. When you have dreams, you'll see images and pictures and so forth that you have to that are your interpretations of the spiritual. And then you have to interpret the dream. You have to interpret what you pick up spiritually. A lot of psychics are not that correct in the way they interpret things, because the language of the spiritual is not clear. Because you're looking at it and you're saying, what does this mean? What does that mean? And you have to interpret it. And your spiritual programming will interpret it. And it can interpret it in a very reasonable, rational way that makes sense and can help you to deal with reality better and can interface with reality better. Or it can be way off. It can be not very much regulated by any kind of rational, logical basis, and can be way off and can get into the direction of delusions. And delusions tend not to be very rational. That's what the definition of them. They're irrational. They don't interface with reality. And there's a lot of and delusions are one of these things that is a matter of degree. In other words, how close are you to the truth, or how far away are you from the truth? The closer you get to the truth, the less delusional you are, the more correct, the more accurate you are. So the less accurate you are, the more delusional you become. So it's not a case of being a clear-cut distinction, even though when somebody does things that are really crazy and outside the box that hurt their ability to deal with reality, you can clearly see that they're delusional. But it's not always that clear. And with me, I had to develop an astrology system because, the connection with the physical universe, the universal connection with the cycles of on a huge scale and out there, the physical and the spiritual are connected. Reality is connected to the spiritual, which means physical, resistant, challenging reality is connected to the spiritual. And the physical is what tests you and challenges you and tests how good your beliefs really are, your spiritual theories, as I say, because I like to use the word spiritual theory because that allows for you to develop it further, to use your mind. And God gave you the mind not to use it, not to be a mindless follower of some cult or just have faith in something without testing it and checking it out and thinking it out. Now, spiritual beliefs run deep because emotions run deep, and the spiritual is connected very strongly with emotions and powered by emotion. So it runs deep. So it's hard to change your spiritual programming. So people who are programmed in their youth usually stick to the same programming and don't want to do the hard work to think it out and to transform it. It's always easier to go with that which has already been. And a lot of the spiritual theories that dominate this world are similar in the different parts of the world. So a lot of times people can change from one traditional belief system to another without it being too shocking because we're all on pretty much the same level spiritually when it comes to the traditional beliefs that are out there that dominate. But if you want to connect and improve your spiritual theories, you have to be able to go into your emotions, deal with them, and be willing to adjust your thinking and deal with the fact that you have to adjust your emotions when you adjust your thinking. So a lot of times the truth hurts. Why? Because you see things a certain way and the truth comes to you, and it's painful to realize, oh, I was way off track. This was caused by my ignorance. If I had only known this wouldn't have happened. That can be painful. And the reason the truth is hard and difficult is because the truth connects you with reality, and reality is hard and difficult. And maybe a lot of people don't know how hard and difficult reality is, but all they have to do is look in this world and see the problems we have in this world and how people aren't handling very well. Then you know how difficult things are. Things are really difficult in this world, and we have to have the thinking and the reasoning that allows us to deal with that difficulty and the truth that comes with that kind of thinking. Because when you get a truth, it has to interface with reality. So there's a difficulty factor involved in it. Now, going back to the fact I developed an astrology system, I had to develop that astrology system with a combination of both intuition, which means connecting with my feelings and connecting with the spiritual, as where I'm at the time, and trying to figure out a logical way to put things together, because you can have all the spiritual training and intensity or whatever, but if it isn't rational, if it isn't based on some logical system, it will not work. An astrology system will only work when it has the combination of the right assumptions, and those assumptions are put in a reasonable way because the universe is reasonable. And that's the way it is with a lot of things. You have to have the assumption, this is the way the spiritual works. I've done my training. I've trained myself spiritually. I can sense that this is when I'm correct or not as to how it works. And I can use trial and error and figure out what is likely to be the best assumption to have. And then I can use logic and reason to try to put something sensible and rational together that will work using these assumptions. And then I can constantly be testing and checking and rethinking, because the creative process is trial and error. And you make certain assumptions based on your intuition, what your heart tells you based on its present programming, your present state of spiritual training. You make certain assumptions, and then you apply reason and logic and try to set up a system that works. And then you test it. How do you test it? You push yourself really hard. You set up really high standards for yourself. And when you're pushing yourself really hard, pushing the edge, the mistakes get exaggerated. And then you're going to make mistakes that are not up to your standards. And you say something is not right. The astrology system, as I've set it up, is not working for me. I need to improve it. And that not only does that work for an astrology system, that works for all your spiritual theories in general. Now, an astrology system will have to have the right spiritual theories behind it, so an astrology system becomes like a testing ground for how well your spiritual theories work. And hopefully in the future, I will reach some other astrologers and I will be able to teach my astrology system to people that can understand and value it. Once I get some popularity, I'll be able, people start listening to me, then I'll be able to explain bit by bit about my astrology system. But there's no point in talking about it right now because it's very complicated and I need to have the reputation that the people that have the interest in it will be willing to listen to me, the professionals, the people that can understand something on that level. And then I am more of a developer of an astrology system than a reader, even though I can read astrology charts. I'm more of the creative type that developed it. I want to train people to be able to read astrology charts and to be able to use this spiritual tool I've developed to make a big difference in this world. I've tested it on a bunch of celebrity charts and a bunch of people in the past I've done charts on, and some in the present. So it hasn't been just me it was tested on. It had to fit my intuition as to being good enough to match the personalities of the people I knew. But that's the thing, is you have to combine both using your heart, your intuition, your feelings to make the right assumptions about things, to sense what's really happening spiritually. Then you have to use logic and reason in figuring out how to apply those assumptions to the real world, how to figure out how to do a reasonable action based on those assumptions, and to have theories, spiritual theories developed that are reasonable, that you don't have to, oh, what does this mean? What does that mean? What does this mean? If they're reasonable or logical, you can immediately put them into action and make a difference in this world. You don't get put in this kind of fuzzy state of mind. Oh, it could mean this, it could mean that, it could mean everything. If it's logical and reasonable, you know what to do. And that's what we need in this world. We need people that have more of a sense of how to react spiritually and behave better spiritually, and not have their intuition distorted by all these different types of pleasures that are out there that are addictive in nature. Not all pleasures necessarily are addictive, because some of them are healthy and valuable, but there's a lot of pleasures that are not rational, that take away people's sober, rational part of them. And that's why it's so important to develop a very cool, rational, reasonable side of you. And it needs to be balanced. There is a balance between feelings and emotions in the spirit, which is spiritual is dominated by, in the rational and the reasonable. There's a balance that has to be there in order for us to function the best. And why would those two things that are quite different have to work together? Well, the spiritual only works well if there's a oneness. And the oneness does not exclude any factor in reality. It values all factors that are an important part of reality. So you don't shut down the mind and just let the feeling dominate and get all the heartache and all the disaster. And you don't just behave based on reason and logic and have no feel for how to do things. You can't, a lot of things, you have to use your intuition to sense to what degree do I do this? To what degree is it safe? How do I do this? What, how strongly do it? To what degree do I apply myself to this? A lot of the things in this world require intuition and intuitive sense for the right thing to do. But you have to have logic and reason to put you in the ballpark till you're close enough. So when you're using your feel to determine what the right amount of effort or touch that's required or adjustment, it will work because you are close enough to the target that you can get the proper feel for things. So there has to be that balance, and that's what a lot of times is lacking in this world. You have people that go one way and people go to the other extreme, and extremism can cause a lot of trouble because the truth tends to be in the complicated middle. The truth is not easy to figure out. It's when people develop conspiracy theories because they're trying to make things appear more readily understood than they can be. They like to demonize certain parts of the public and become very self-righteous. And that's what you have to watch out for. You have to stay away from extremism and try to develop a oneness that understands the diversity of this world and stays away from the extreme type people. And when you're talking about intuition and feelings and being connected with reality, you can read all these things that sound logical and reasonable and make a lot of sense. But if your intuition's going to tell you a certain amount, is this a reliable source, or is there something wrong with this source? Does this jive with my sense of how reality works, or does it not? So intuition is very important to finding the right sources to get information and to find out what type of people are reliable and what type of people are delusional and will give you wrong information or will interpret things wrong. So you have to develop your intuition so that you can get the right sources to use. And there's a lot of sources, as I said, it can sound very reasonable and logical, but the evidence is not good. The people that are developing, that are representing themselves as good sources are not good sources. So everything involves a combination of intuition and reason, and that's how we can get the most out of ourselves, and that's how the world functions better. It's when you don't have too much an emphasis on science or reason and logic and rationality, and not enough sense to the intuitive, the psychic senses, the part of you that cannot be calibrated so readily and it's not a sense that science has a tendency to understand because it's not the most understandable sense. It's a feeling sense. And so the topic today has to do with the heart and mind, and I'm trying to explain how it's important to combine the two and not get caught up in too much heart that can make you overly self-righteous, or even too much reason can make you overly self-righteous. Balance the two together and get that balance, that sense for where reality really is, rather than a one-sided point of view of reality. So the subject of today has been heart and mind and how they need to work together, how feelings and intuition and reason and rationality need to work together, how the truth is often very difficult to figure out and it's usually found in a complicated middle. I thank everybody for watching. This is Positive Vibes Enterprise. And please subscribe to our channel, and thank you very much.